Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coffee with Jen and Sharon. Good morning, Sharon.
Hi, Jen. How are you doing today?
Good. We were both just discussing a moment ago how we're having some allergy issues today. There's something in the air in
Yeah,
Cleveland. I don't
that's why
know.
I had the glasses on. I had to
Yeah, and
take my contacts out because my eyes turned red. I mean, the whites of my
mhm.
eyes were so red. It looked like, I don't know, I'd been on a bender all night or something.
uh, Maybe nobody will judge. These
No.
things happen. So we had an interesting discussion at our behind the scenes on Mondays. If you don't know, on Mondays we have a staff meeting with the rest of our editorial team. And we always broadcast a few minutes of it where we talk about some topic that is on our minds. And an offshoot of that topic made me think of what we're going to talk about today, which is, do you either A, get accused of, or B, find yourself doing this thing where maybe one child is being treated differently from another? And
Hmm.
maybe it's something, could be around bedtime or what age they got a smartphone, who gets to use the car, um, any number of things that where this can arise. And my question to you, Sharon, is it inevitable? I mean, is it inevitable that we will treat our children differently from one another? Is there any way you could ever be completely equitable or even Stephen on anything you do with your kids?
I
What do
don't
you
think
think?
so. I don't. I mean,
Okay.
everything you were listing, I'm like, yeah, I've been accused of or have done all those things, treated them differently.
I promise I did not pull your children.
It's it has to happen. I mean, you can spend the same amount on birthdays or holidays. You can mark that out to the penny, but you know, not everything is quantifiable, and there's always going to be times when kids get different things, and it just doesn't make sense sometimes to not. I mean, well, tell me how you handle this because you have two girls who
Hmm.
are now elder teens or well early 20s even
Yep.
college and early 20s. And I
Yeah.
have a boy and two girls. And let's talk about hand me downs. Did you do hand me downs? And so the one
Oh.
child gets all new things. Or maybe they get cousin hand me downs or neighbor hand me
Hmm.
downs sometimes. But if it's within your own family, it just doesn't make sense to not give the big clothes to the child who's coming up. It would be wasteful, right? Not to.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and you and I both grew up in a family with five kids, and we're at the bottom of the pile. So we all got our hand-me-downs. And I actually kind of looked forward to it. There were things that I could see my siblings wearing. I was like, "Ooh, someday that'll be mine." But yeah, there were times when I would have liked to have had my own new thing too, for sure. I think that because we have a big family and my siblings all have kids too, we actually got a lot of cousin hand-me-downs, and that
Mm.
made it sort of fun. Like they enjoyed getting things from their cousins, but I don't think either of my kids had a new winter coat until they were, into almost adulthood because it seemed wasteful. Like you said, like here's a great coat, but the first time I do remember the first time one of my kids she wanted a North Face coat, and then my first thought after I got her with that was like, oh, now I'm going to have to get one for the other one because
Mhm.
what you do for one, you feel like you have to do for the other. Um, but I didn't because the other one actually didn't end up necessarily feeling the same way about it. She got her own coat, but it didn't have to be that particular coat. So, yeah, sometimes I think we overthink it sometimes and we're like, oh, I have to do this because I did this. I did this for A child, so I have to do this for B child. Maybe they don't like the same things. So
Maybe not.
I think that you can fall into this trap, and yet, um, even if you go overboard trying to make it even, I think it's part of the teen narrative to feel like you're getting the shaft.
Yeah.
And if that's the narrative, we could do everything in the world to try to counteract it. Nothing's going to shift that narrative at a certain point because it's the thing you didn't think about. You were being careful about making sure you spent the same on birthdays, but they were noticing that child A had got an Instagram account at 13 and child B got it at 12. I mean,
Mhm.
you're gonna get slayed for something, right?
Yeah. And I heard somebody very wise say once, kids will get they'll say something. If they think it's unfair, they're not going to hold back. And I think even before the teen years, that's a real quality of kids. They just fairness. It's not fair. And it seems selfish sometimes. Like, why is it always you? But somebody wise pointed out to me that is how kids become activists for the right thing, because they notice the things that we might take for granted. And they say that in the world is not right. That's not fair, because they don't accept what we say and they reevaluate everything from the, from a fresh perspective. And they sometimes that is good, but it is annoying on a day-to-day basis sometimes in the house. It's like,
right. And that assumes that they can turn it around outward at some point. So it's not about I'm being mistreated or untreated fairly. It's about this situation is not fair for everyone. And I do see that happening with young people a lot. I'm going to stick up for them on that and say, a lot of times they do notice that, and they do point things out like, why it's not fair that, these workers are getting treated less than these workers just because they are hourly and those other employees are working, at a fancy bank or something. They do notice that. So it's good that we keep that perspective in mind too. So what are some of the other things that you've been accused of being unfair about, and how do you acquit yourself?
Well, here's a tricky one. So what happens when you have a teenager who's almost or is adult size and they want to eat more of the special food than the little one does? What?
Food insecurity issues.
Oh my gosh. Oh, his piece is bigger. Well, he's bigger or she's bigger. And I mean, I get it. I was not only the youngest, I am the youngest of 5. I was also the littlest of the 5. So like, I get that feeling like, well, am I getting my portion? Am I getting my share? But sometimes, that's just an example of not all children are the same. I mean,
right.
You remember that Chris Rock routine where he said the dad gets the big piece of chicken? I don't know if you heard that one. Like,
no, but I'm hearing his voice.
You better not take that big piece of chicken. That's for your dad, because he in that family was the biggest one. So, I mean, they're not always the same.
Well, I think my mom got around that by most of our meals were self-serve. And the rule was always take what you want, but eat what you take, which is something my dad learned in the Army. That's what they told them. But it's every man for himself. Like, if you're done first and you want to go back for seconds, you get in there, because there weren't enough green beans to go around. So you had to get in there if you wanted your green beans. So you had to, throw a few elbows sometimes to get what you wanted. But this also puts me in mind of that. Have you ever seen that, like a visual representation of equity versus equality, where they have kids standing on the boxes, and equality is both kids get the same size box, but the shorter kid then can't see over the fence. And equity is the shorter kid gets a taller box to match to make it possible for them both to see over the fence.
Right.
So the idea of different things
in the same place
according to what they need makes a lot of sense to us as adults, but I think teens are a little more literal with it, and they're like, but I got X and she got Y or he got Y, and that's not fair. And it's really hard to explain that concept sometimes on about things that are more less obvious than the box.
Right.
So I don't even know if we can try. Should we try? I don't know if we should try.
I don't know. I mean, I think that we're going to keep reevaluating because our kids will prompt us to. But another area where this comes up is in discipline and rules. And I don't know if you have ever found with your girls that the kids want to parent each other too. They say, well, she shouldn't be allowed to do that. She's too young for that. Or why do you let them get away with that? Or I would be punished for that. Why aren't they being punished for that? Do you find this? They have this desire to correct your discipline as well.
Oh, for sure. And as the youngest of 5, I felt I was on the receiving end of that plenty. The older siblings were happy to jump in and correct your grammar or tell you that you were dressed dumb, or that your friends were not behaving appropriately, things that your parents should normally do. And it felt like, hey, that's not fair. I already have parents. I don't want you doing that. So then the trap is, sometimes as the parent, I might jump in and say, I've got this. I'll take care of this. And the older one might interpret that as, you're always taking her side. Which
Right.
it's like this continuous feedback loop. Again, I come back to the idea that if the narrative in their head is already, I'm being treated unfairly, or I'm getting the wrong end of the deal, there's so very little I feel like you can do that counteracts that narrative. I think they just kind of have to outgrow it at some point, or not. Maybe it persists into adulthood. I hope it doesn't, but at some point you hope that they see a bigger picture and realize, okay, we were at different stages, so it was appropriate that I got treated X and she got treated Y. It's a really hard concept to explain. But here's an interesting one that kind of came up a little bit in our discussion on Monday, which is boy versus girl. Are there different ways you treat them because of safety issues? And I think girls see that and they feel like that's not fair. And they are correct. It isn't fair,
Right.
but it is a reality that we live with. Sometimes we let our boys do things, ride their bike to a friend's house after dark, or walk to a friend's house after dark, that we might not feel comfortable doing for a girl. And that it's a bummer that is the way it is. But we just feel that's the world we live in.
Yeah. I was bringing that up because my oldest is a boy, and we do let him walk home in the dark sometimes from a friend's house. I wouldn't feel comfortable with his sisters being the same age and doing it. And he was going to a party recently, and I was trying to figure out whether it was a safe party to go to. And one of the questions I said out loud, which kind of baffled him, I said, do you think that this would be safe, or if it was one of your sisters going? He's like, what? Why are you asking me that? But I'm thinking, if I let you go to this kind of party and it's not a safe party, then in 2 years, 3 years, whenever your sister comes up, she's going to say, but you let him do it and you don't let me do it. And I also don't think it's a bad thing for the boys to be reminded, hey, girls have to process all these things differently. Like, you can go through life and not have to worry about whether, you're watching behind you and you have your keys in your hand and all that. It's not a bad thing for them to have to think about the fact that there are these unfairnesses.
Right. And that they can do things to make girls in their life and later women feel more comfortable around them. Like, shuffle your feet a little bit when you're walking behind them so that they know you're back there, or whatever it is, the things that the tips that they pick up over time. But
right. It's
he probably thought you were asking because he was worried that you were going to send them to this party with him. He was probably having a panicky moment.
I definitely wasn't doing that, but that would be a no-go.
Yeah, but, for sure.
This reminds me of another thing that came up. Hopefully my children are not allowed to hit each other. I mean, that's pretty basic, right? But I think that, and my son pointed this out, he said, I was not as strict about the girls, like pushing each other, or he'd say, she pushed me, or and I was always thinking, well, they're not going to hurt anybody. They're smaller and they're girls and you're a big boy. But then I realized, you know what? He's right. I should not tolerate this from the girls either. So I had to, in fairness to him, and truly they shouldn't be like getting physical with each other. It's pretty minor, but still I wanted to draw a hard line. And, sometimes the kids are right. They actually teach us something when they point out these unfairnesses. So.
That's a good point. So how did you codify this rule? Like, nobody can hit anybody at all ever.
No hitting. And then it's funny that they sometimes they want to like poke at each other, the girls, or play. And they said, we agreed. We're just going to like poke each other instead, because you didn't say we couldn't poke. You said we couldn't push or slap or whatever. So what I did, and this is kind of my go-to lately because my children apparently are money motivated, I find them. So normally
I love it.
Normally, it's like we have this whole. I have an app I use for allowance, so all I have to do is go on my phone and I press. I'm taking $1
Oh.
because you left, that filthy mess in the bathroom. And then but
that did not come up last week when we talked about Cool Mom Tech, an app that lets you give and take money away
I'm
like
not
that.
sure
That's a
that's
great
cool.
one.
I'm not sure I'm cool, but maybe
Well,
the other moms think I'm cool. But
cool for
this
mom.
one, I said, if you hit each other, I'm taking $5. Like I've never had a fine this big, or this is 5 times more than any fine I've ever had, because it is unacceptable for you to be hitting one another. And I think there were 3 fines levied over 2 children, and it hasn't happened since. So
Excellent.
Pat. Oh, what does James have to
money
say?
talk. Yeah, let's see. I want to see. I like the dad view sometimes here. This is good. All right. James says fairness is not the same as equality. It has been my experience that my kids call me out as being unfair when I'm being unequal. It is fair to let an 8-year-old is it fair to let an 8-year-old and an 18-year-old have the same responsibilities, privileges, or even the amount of cake? We think no. But I'm going to guess that the 8-year-old says, yes, that's unfair. I want to be able to drive that car too. Yeah, no, obviously, there are some things that we know it's a bright line and it's very easy to say, yeah, it's age appropriate for this person. It's not age appropriate for you. There's even rules out there like about what movie you're allowed to see, because it's not my rule. It's the Motion Picture Association's rule.
Yes.
So
which is sometimes why we like those external rules and guidance, because we can just say, see, it's not just me, or there is some sort of other guideline.
Right. But God help you. You bend the rule once for one kid and you don't for the other. That's where you get in trouble. And we see nuances in these circumstances. Sometimes we're like, but in this circumstance, it did make sense, and I did it for this reason. And you could go down that path all day long and explain it, and you're just never getting yourself out of that hole, I think.
Right. And Jen, I think where this comes in, you do it for one, you do it for the other, is how the youngest get away with so much more, because often, not always, but I think I remember sometime when I'm the youngest of 5, so my older siblings, I think I remember my parents saying, well, I don't want to set a precedent. They said it out loud. And I'm like, that stuck in my mind. And I probably even used that when I was a teenager, like, oh, sure, I could go to New York City with my friends. It's not setting a precedent for anybody else. It's just me I have to worry about. So.
Oh, you are clever. That wouldn't even have occurred to me.
We should have.
That's why you went to law school and I didn't. Okay, what does Brianna say?
Fairness and equality are totally different. I can't punish my child with ADHD is the same as my neurotypical kids. That is so absolutely hard. Do they get that?
Right. We understand that we are parenting the child that we have and the children. If you have more than one, they are not the same. So yes, your parenting is necessarily going to be different because you want to help support them in the ways that they need the support. And it's not going to be the same, whether it's as, that obvious as like, a neurotypical difference, or it can be just something more subtle. Like, that one kid really struggles with organization and the other one doesn't. So maybe you do spend a little bit more for the one who needs some special organizers for their drawers and the other one doesn't need it. So they don't get it. It's parenting. It's, moments to accomplish, lifetime to master.
Just when we start to master it, then the kids leave. And that's, I think, how you become a know-it-all grandparent, right?
Oh, maybe so.
No, I'm not planning on.
I think that's how you become an indulgent grandparent. And that's why that little gap persists of like why the grandkids like to spend time with the grandparents, because now the grandparent doesn't have to have the same rules that they did when they were the parent.
That's right, because it doesn't have to be equal to be fair. Grandparents can be more indulgent, and that's fine. Different rules, different places, same children.
Right.
Yes, I like that. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for weighing in on this with us. We know it's a thorny problem without a whole lot of great solutions, but we just like to talk about it. So
yeah, and keep dropping your comments. We love to read them, and
we'll
see you next
absolutely.
week.
We will see you same place, same time next week. Have a good weekend.